Okay, hopefully we will see some English books from him as well, or translations.
Inshallah, it would be so important and it would be so helpful because
Or maybe we should learn German.
That's on my to-do list.
that's also
On your to-do list. A short-term goal. Okay.
Oh no, very long term.
Very short. He
It's
speaks
at the
English,
bottom
so
of
very short-term goal. So, guys, what have we done? Did we check the verses? Did we read a little bit about them? And did we try to see if actually that that's cool? If that chronology works or think? Who is gonna start? So Susan, let me explain you for shortly. I'm gonna show you now my screen. Yeah, screen share.
Okay.
Share computer sound. No, don't share the computer sound. Yeah. Okay. So Susan,
okay.
last week we
Yes.
talked about the chronology of revolution, and some scholars suggest that this is the first chronology, the first verses. Oh, sorry again. Yeah. No. I'm sorry, guys. No. This should be, but it goes. Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah.
So these are mainly this is the accepted approach that the first revealed verse surah, you know do you know Islamic terms, or shall I use English as well?
Yes, I know.
Yeah. Surah or chapter. The first chapter was alaq, the blood cloth, and the second one was qalam, pen, and the third one is supposedly muzammil, which is enwrapped. The fourth one is muddathir, shrouded. Fifth is opening, al-Fatiha, and the sixth is al-Masad, palm fiber. And then it goes on, and the other 10, but because students were a little bit lazy, we decided to keep it with 6 of them. So the homework was, the question was, read a bit about these verses and surahs, the chapters, and see if actually this chronology makes sense or not. This is the suggested chronology, but we shall see what our students think. Yeah, who wants to go first?
Interesting question.
Christian, would you like to?
Shall I? Yeah. All right. All right. I looked through the first surahs in your list, and the first thing after that, like looking into them and reading them, was then to compare them with the Noldeke chronology. And interesting is that they differ very much. It's very, very interesting. So, for example, Surah 74 in Noldeke is second in chronology. So what I saw from reading was interesting, that both 73 and 74 seem to be connected because of the initial addressing of Muhammad, as I see it, peace be upon him. Interesting is that in Noldeke, both those two surahs are separated in chronology, and Surah 73 in Noldeke is on chronology level, like rank 23, so very late in the early Mecca chronology. I was surprised actually to find the Lahab surah in the early ones, like your list. I always considered them a little bit later when Muhammad was actually a bit more prominent, and Lahab was actually really opposing him a lot. And I also was surprised to have Surah 68 a second one, because it's a not a
I thought
very
it was
long,
first.
not a very long, but it's a bit a longer one. And there are some references where I would, from my feeling, would say perhaps that's a bit later, but it's difficult for me to say actually. I haven't looked up all the different tafsirs and revelation stories about them. So it's really so that was my basic thing mainly. I was a bit surprised about the Lahab one, and I was surprised also in regard to the comparison of the others. And yeah, interesting. I really am fascinated about that.
Thank you. Moise?
So, like by and large, I didn't have any problem with the order of the verses or the chapters. And I also looked at the next six. So I looked until chapter 94, and I
Mm-hmm.
found that there was some sort of a transition. So it starts by saying recite, and I mean I've heard this quite often in traditions that this was the first. You know, revelation. So I guess we can be fairly certain that 96 was the first surah for sure. And then you
Yeah.
can see this connection where the first few chapters talk about being patient, having faith, reminding the prophet constantly that he's not mad, he's not delusional, he's not hallucinating, um, recognizing this fear that he had at the beginning, you know, the sign that he was going back after the revelation and wrapping himself up in his blanket back home. God is asking him to come out of that and address the world. So those verses I found to be fitting in, and even like the Abu Lahab, Masad, Surah Masad, we know that he was persecuted for saying the message. People were denying his, his message, saying that he's mad. He doesn't know what he's saying. These are just legends of old people. That's what's in Surah 68. And then slowly you can see that the message changes. So, like when you look at verse 18, chapter 89, or chapter 93, 94. Allah then says that He has not left you, He has not detested you, He has found you as an orphan and given you refuge, He has found you poor and He has, lifted you up, He has given you the respect. And then in chapter 94, he even says He has removed your burden and raised you high and lifted your burden. So, in a sense, it shows some sort of transition from initially being completely rejected and outcast from the society as the revelation started moving more towards gathering a group of people and being able to spread his message more. A couple of issues that I had with this is the positioning of Al-Fatiha,
Yeah.
um, which I found. I mean, again, there are some traditions that ask whether this should be included in the Quran, or was it some additional incantation, in a sense. So I was a little bit unsure of the place of that, because the surah before and the surah after in this chronology were both talking about how hell is a terrible thing for the sinners and a lot of sinners will be sent to hell. And then in Fatiha we learn like God is the most merciful and is going to
Mhm.
treat everybody well. So I found that like a bit jarring there. And the other thing that I don't know is I believe there was a significant time period between the first chapter and then the following one. So I think that itself was a period of a couple of years. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how quickly, like even though it seems like within the first 10 surahs, the Prophet goes from being completely rejected to having his burden lifted. But I don't know what that was in terms of a historical time scale and whether that was feasible in that short time for him to go from being rejected to him being accepted, at least in this sort of narrative storyline.
Mm.
So those were my two sort of concerns. But overall, I was, happy about the overall order, I guess.
It's interesting. I'd like to add something because that was interesting for me as well. I didn't mention that because the Fatiha positioning was also interesting because as I compared it to the Noldeke list, Noldeke lists Fatiha as number 48 of the chronology. So right at the end of the early Mecca era, as the transfer to the middle Mecca era, and that was. I also thought, okay, this is surprising that Fatiha is so early. Yeah. I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, thank you, guys. That narration, order comes from Zarkashi. I'm trying to remember my source. Sorry, guys, for that.
Allama Marifat.
Allama Marifat also mentions, yeah, but.
Is that the one? Sorry, I can't see your slide.
Sorry?
Was it on your slide?
Yeah, Allama Marifat, it is his book.
Oh, okay.
It is not. It is the book and the modern book about Quranic sciences.
Oh, okay.
But this chronology actually mostly this way it comes from as a base from Zarkashi's view, but it is also supported by Ibn Abbas and many other scholars, Jabir bin Zayd as well. But in general, this order is regarded as the main possible order. As you say, there are few, like you can put this one a little bit down, the other one a little bit down, or the other one a little bit further, but in general the order is this. But there are problems with this order. There are very, very big problems in some cases, especially like in the Mudaththir. Allah talks about read Quran, but we know that there was almost only three. If that's the fourth chapter, then there were only three more chapters to read. So read 1/3 of the night. Read. So this is a little bit. It seems that part possibly is a little later, and also
was this in Muzammil?
Muzammil.
I think it was in Muzammil. I remember noticing that and thinking, oh, that's weird.
Maybe it is actually, then it is even weirder. I might let me check. You see my page, right?
Yeah, but it's in Turkish.
No, it's
in but there's some English as well. Okay, cool.
No, it is in English as well.
Yeah, just go early in Muzammil.
Actually, is it read?
It says recite, I believe the word was.
Exactly, because I have the German translation here, and the translation says recite.
Yeah, recite.
Recite. It's verse 4.
Oh.
Recite. So you should stand apart the half of the night, whatever, and long it and recite in a
nice way.
In a nice way,
and
so
proper
to say.
way. Yeah.
So the German translation is to recite and.
No. English is also to recite. English also is to recite, which actually makes it a little bit more difficult because the verb is used is rattala. It can normally mean recite, but to recite you have to have something. But to read you don't need to have something to read. You can read. You can read wilderness. You can read nature. You can read yourself. You can read your soul. You can read society. This can be read in Arabic term. I am talking in English. I think in English also it works that way, right, Moise?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, I can
But
see that.
you can't say I recited my feeling.
Yeah, you recite
recite.
a piece of text or
Yeah,
a
it
song or
needs a
something.
text for recitation. Same way
Yeah.
goes for Quran as well. Rattala, rattala is, if you are using the verb rattala, it is reading from a text, or in the sense of Arabs, we can say reading from memory,
Narrate.
like poetry, you know, that
Mm.
would recitation. But reading Iqra, the one which was used in the first verse, right? In the first verse, it was saying Iqra. So in the first verse, it says Iqra, and it is to read, but it can mean, it doesn't necessarily mean read a book, read a text, or read a poem. It normally means I mean, reading in this sense is a little bit wider than reciting. So for that meaning, if we look at the Muzammil, and the first verse of fourth verse of Muzammil says recite Quran, but we only have two pieces of Quran.
Yeah.
And if they are revealed all together.
But I'd like to challenge that now. Because
and also, as you mentioned, Nadleka says Muzammil actually is the second, right?
No, that was Mudaththir.
No. Christian,
Yeah.
what is the second revealed according to Nadleka?
Pen. Al-Kalam.
He also puts pen. And the third?
No, Noldeke. I'm sorry. Noldeke is actually putting 74. That's Mudathir. And then all those small surahs came: 111, 106, 108, 104, 107. So 73 is coming on position 23.
Oh, see, it makes more sense actually.
So
That's true.
That would make sense. But on the other side, what I wanted to add is Surah 68 is not a very, very short surah. So and we have in the first one, in the 96, we have of course God uses a different word for it, but obviously it was about like giving other people the information you have, like reading or reciting or narrating. Perhaps there are differences in the area on that time, that this one word was used in a more holy way or something like that, or elegant way, and the other one was a more normal down to earth thing. But with 73 at third position, it's not like you would not have anything to recite. Actually, you have two surahs before that, and you have 73, which is revealed. You have that also to recite. And from the very beginning, the idea is obviously that there is a revelation which shall be recited. So 73 is not only meant in regard to recite what I already sent you, but also what is going to be sent. That would be my approach to the whole thing. If we stick with that order, I would say 73 would be okay, because it does also give the idea of what is coming in the future. There's coming more in the future. There's coming a lot of text, and you're gonna recite it, please.
Yeah. We can think that way as well. That's true.
But one of the other issues, sorry, Masad.
Sure.
One of the other issues that I found in 73 was there's a verse that says, "Your Lord knows that a group of you stands in the night in prayer." So if it was that early, like how many people were standing in prayer together as a group?
And
at the beginning.
if we actually follow the traditions, this verse was revealed this surah was revealed very early, and there were only few, like 3 or 4 people who believed.
Okay, so more than one.
No, just let me see. So there is a narration that this verse is revealed in very early, very early, like few hours or one day or around after the first verse. But there is other narration saying that the second this verse came 3 years afterwards. There was nothing. Or there are 6 months as well. There's one narration as well about talking about 6 months. I am not sure about how long was the time in between, but
I read about that the scholars are not clear about that at all. So
cannot be clear as well.
They never decided on that actually.
Yeah, cannot be clear as well because it's for very early time, and we don't really know a lot about early time. And what we know is Ali and Khadija was believer, and we don't know if there was any other believer in that time. So especially first years, there were only two believers. One was the wife, and the second one was the foster child. So in that sense, yeah, you are right. That verse is also a challenging some of you. Yeah, that verse is also challenging. But I mean, for the order of the revolution, there are a lot of problems. Like whichever part we hold, there is some part stays in between our hands. We can't make a clear, definite, possible order, unfortunately, because there is always a problem within. Because some of the scholars, as last week we mentioned, some of the scholars believe that the verses revealed separately and then they were put together for as a chapter, which I am not really fond of this idea, because it can actually, why not? But from the other sources, it seems actually most of the chapters revealed all together. Not all.
But exactly, how about Baqarah then? Because
not all. That's why Baqarah is clearly not revealed together. No, that's very clear from the other sources, because some of the Baqarah verses are from Mecca, some are from Medina. So that's why we know it. But mainly the verses, when they were being revealed, especially these first early verses, early chapters, they were revealed all together, it seems. But then again, some scholars say, for example, only the the first 5 verses of the chapter 98 was revealed, 96, sorry, it was revealed first, and then the rest revealed, they say. But yeah, who knows? Fortunately, we can't know, and because we talked about the compilation, we will talk further, inshallah. Compilation as on its own is a big, huge problem. So how are we gonna manage? God knows. So shall we begin for our next one?
Okay.
How do we feel?
Sorry, I just lost myself into a book about.
Today's topic is gonna be about Asbab al-Nuzul, which is called reasons or occasions of revelation. Okay, I am. No, don't see this part. This is not your business. Yep. Okay. So Asbab al-Nuzul, reasons for revelation.
Can you? I'm sorry. Can you exactly like put it away also? Yeah, perfect. Because I make screenshots for me, so yeah.
All right. The Quran was revealed in installments on various occasions, which called for revelation of a verse or verses to deal with their issues. So, what do we mean here is generally when Quran was being revealed, it was every verse was revealed on mostly either because something happened, or after an event, or after celebration, mourning, or anything, or sometimes for no reason, just God is saying something. This also happened. For those, we don't have almost any sabab nuzul. Asbab nuzul is plural, singular is sabab nuzul, which means the reason of the revelation. So we don't have especially for the verses that says do this. So we don't have the commandments, especially we don't have sabab nuzul, but we still have another thing for that, which we will come now. So they have turned those occasions for the reasons, especially when it is the reason of the revelation, we call it asbab nuzul or sabab nuzul singular. Or the background of the revelation, when it was revealed what was the situation, then it is called sha'nun nuzul, shu'unun nuzul. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So what does it matter? Why these two sciences of Quran matter for us to understand Quran or interpret or do some actually to accept in general every verse and their meaning. Why do they matter? So knowing the background of the revelation plays an important role in understanding of the meaning. Why? It sometimes solves the problems of the exegesis in both fields of the belief, usul, the main ones, and practice. How does it do that? Because imagine a verse is there is a verse in front of us, but we do not sometimes understand what the verse means. Like the verse is actually clear. We understand what is verse about, but we don't understand why there is such wording used, or there is the way it is put in place. Why this way it is put in place? Sometimes it's confusing, especially for many scholars. It has been confusing. So Ahmed al-Wahidi says that. It is not possible to know the exegesis of a verse without pausing over the story behind it and explaining the reason for its revelation. What do you think about this? I'm asking now.
I would agree with him. I would agree with him. We can of course dissect Quran and also into its verses and then look upon those verses, but we will not know the deeper meaning behind it and the context. We don't know the context because we have a lot of verses that if you read them in 10th century, in 15th century, or in 20th or 21st century, they have different meanings because of your own personal context. So we need to understand the context when they were revealed for which kind of people, which kind of event, which kind of problem, and then we can adapt them to our approach to Quran. And we can't do that if we do not have the knowledge about it.
That's true.
But unfortunately, that's not how it's always seen. If you believe that the Quran is a universal text that is for all humans at all times, and whatever it means is what it says it means, then the context, in a sense, doesn't really matter. You still stone the adulterers no matter when you find yourself in.
You run into a real difficulty with this kind of viewpoint, because then you have to have imams explain the Quran to you, and then you have to have responsibility given over to somebody else.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
a good point. Yeah, here we are being challenged.
Quran. That would contradict with Quran actually, because
Sorry?
Quran tells us to acquire knowledge on ourselves, to make our decisions. This is rather like super. If you go into a superficial approach to Quran will tell you, well, think and decide on your own. So that would contradict that you would simply stick to somebody explaining to the Quran to you.
On the other hand, it's a requirement for learning and studying, and it really pushes learning and studying, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I do understand your concern, Susan. I really do understand, and it's an important point actually, because Quran kind of generally claims that it is to all, not to only to the scholars. And in Islam, for example, we do not believe in, normally we used to not to believe, not nowadays, but we used to not to believe in a what is it called, in a class of scholars. We used to believe that everyone is able to study and understand Quran, but it has changed, and that's a big concern. But at the same time, if we do not know the context of the verse, that would it be okay to accept each verse as it is? As Moise said, for example, whatever verse is, that is our responsibility to accept, because it is universal. That's an important point, because Quran also makes the statement of being universal. So how do we reconcile between these two understandings?
The other issue is that people often, like in progressive Islam, it's often considered that, okay, we accept all of the universal good moral values that the Quran says, establishing justice, taking care of the poor and stuff. But who decided that those were universal values? What if in today's world we can no longer take care of poor people and we accept that as our reality? So then do we not have the obligation then to apply those universal values? And aren't we also picking and choosing, just like the extremists who say that women are less than men and blah, blah, blah?
Good point, an important point.
If we do not look into the context and we just take Quran superficially in order to look upon the verses and just believe what they say, abrogation and like chronology of topics would not be possible, because then I just pick something out and then it would say, oh well, wine is a wonderful thing.
Well, it doesn't say that though.
Yeah, well, whatever. You know what I mean. Yeah, it's like there are. It would say, for example, I give you another topic. It's about the support of Allah. I don't know the Arabic word anymore. In Baqarah, in the early verses of Baqarah, Musab is like totally flashed. What's wrong? Everything okay?
I am listening. I am just enjoying.
So in Baqarah, in the early verses, God says, well, I sent the Quran for as support for every I think he said even Muslim or whatever. So it's for us as a support. And later on, in the end of Baqarah, he says, well, you should face like this and that. As you can see, the Quran is a support to all humankind. So if we have those two verses within one surah, what shall we now believe? Shall we believe the one or the other? And that's the point. I mean, we can simply we can pick, of course, if we go superficial on it and say, okay, every verse on its own is like perfect and it's valid in this way, and it's total. And we just pick something we want, and that's the same thing as the. You just pick something up, and then it's valid. That's not, in my opinion, it's not the proper way to deal with the message of God. I don't know. It's really.
Yeah.
I think what I find interesting is, for example, Amina Wadud's approach, where she would say that it's not just about knowing the context of each verse, it's about starting out with an understanding of the entire text and saying these are the universalist principles that are clearly defined in the Quran. And now we will take each verse not just in the context of when it was revealed, but also test each verse again with those universalist principles.
Absolutely.
And then derive the meaning from that. So there's like an additional
where
step.
do you get that those universal laws?
Humans are naturally given the sense to establish
Why
right
do we
from
need
wrong. I don't know.
scripture?
Exactly. So that's my question really. Is
Then let's close the topic, and from today was the last day of unnecessary wasted Quranic classes. No, why do we need the scripture then if it is actually if there is a universal law and it is accepted by everyone and completely universal? So why do we need? And Quran is also just saying the same thing. It's waste of time to add another book and another book and another book. Not reading a book is not waste of time, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think she answered that question.
Where do we actually draw the line? Where is the limit when we can say, oh, actually this verse does not fit in, like and in the other part, oh, actually no, this verse is all completely agreeing with the universal law. So where do we do this?
Yeah.
These are important questions, but back to the topic, especially the topic about the conversation we were having about the Asbab al-Nuzul, in the importance of the context, is scholarly believing, scholarly approaching Quran, the contextualizing the Quranic verses is the most important. Actually, this can answer the question we were just asking, which verses are actually about us and which are not about, which are not applicable today. If you know the context of the verses and you know the universality, but the universality of Quran is not individual, every verse is universal. No. Or letters are universal. Definitely not. We will see it in the next few sessions that the letters were decided afterwards. We deem they could have decided instead of Kufi script, they could have decided Nabatean or Syriac or Arabic. Hebrew, but they went for the Kufi Southern Arabic. This is not important. So what is the universality of Quran in this sense? The values, as you said, and Amina Wadud puts it very beautifully, but the question is there still. Why that value is important but not this one? Why the value of not lying is important, but prisoning our woman inside the house is not important? Who says which is better than the other? Do you understand what I mean? For sure, we can say our knowledge of humanity can decide what is wrong and right as well. I do believe each individual, we are given values. What we hang the what is it called? The balancing the scale of the value we have, but then the scripture would be quite unnecessary to put it in the same way. Do you know what I mean, guys?
Yeah, you could have like a 10-point list.
Yes.
Of what's important.
Or we didn't even need those 10 points because we already apparently in the end of the day we came to a conclusion that we already agree on those comments, even though most of us do not believe in those comments. Lying is a bad thing. Doesn't matter which culture you are from.
I'd like to add an aspect in regard to universality. And the point is, when we know the context of the different verses and parts of the surahs, when we know that context, then we can actually learn about history a little bit. And about the context when it was revealed. And it may be that the verse would not fit to us anymore because we are more progressive in our development or whatever, like in regard to, for example, heritage of women or whatever, of slavery, but we actually learn about the history of what Allah was given to Muhammad, and Muhammad giving to humankind, actually, that what steps they would take in order to give us progress. And that's something which is highly rated, in my opinion, from Allah, to learn about history and to learn about things that are connected with each other. So the universality, opinion, is that somebody from 10th or 15th or 21st century can look upon the verses and learn something. He will learn something different. I will learn something different from somebody from 15th or from 10th century, but nevertheless, I will learn something, and I think that's something universal, which is one of the core aspects of the Quran.
That could be quite challenged. I do agree with the contextualizing, but the universality, limiting universality into doing this, someone can learn from it. That is quite. I mean, that's a little bit problematic. I see as a personal view, because any text, even not just text, anything in the world that an artifact exists, some people can learn something from it, and in any time of the history. So that is not a very, then the universality is applied, can be applied to everything, literally. Do you see the, what makes, because
I'm sorry to say it, but universality is derived as a word from universe, isn't it? And the universe is full. I mean, the universe is full of creation. The creation is the key, actually, because it's all about understanding creation in a better way, in a deeper way. So I wouldn't say that. I know, I am aware that this. I wouldn't limit universality in that regard. I would say that's one of the approaches.
Yeah,
but of course, I am aware that this can be challenged very much, because a lot of people consider Quran as something extremely extremely precious and extremely special. And of course, in regard to giving nudges, giving input into your spiritual development, it is like that. I mean, if you could stand in front of a tree, and I think Quran will give you more input in regard to your personal development. So I think there is a difference between looking upon a tree and reading Quran. I wouldn't reduce that. But on the other side, for example, Zen Buddhists or Zen monks would differ in that idea. They would say, no, looking onto a tree for your whole life is much more interesting, much more spiritually developed. I don't know.
I don't know what happened. I was just.
I was talking too much.
No.
Skype broke.
Yeah, you are talking too much. That's something else.
Of course I am. Of course you have to shut me up.
No, there is no need. We have time. That's why I didn't shut you up, and it was important. Otherwise, I would. It was important to add those parts. Yeah, that's true. But when we say universal Quran, when we see Quran as universal, we need to make a point that these adjectives, the adjective we use, universal Quran, makes sense or is valuable, or otherwise Quran is a book. When we say Quran is a book, that's true, but it's tautology. You are not making any sense. You are just repeating a reality with no additional information. So universality, when we say universality, we need to make clear that universality of Quran is actually applicable, and it makes sense, and it is different than from any other from something else. Otherwise, everything is universal, so that we don't need to repeat it. So I believe the contextual for the contextualizing, and in the future another one of the main sciences we will learn, nasakh, abrogation of Quran. This part is very important. Knowing the sabab nuzul is very important, and we will have some examples as well. Hopefully, let's begin to these examples. By the way, welcome Majid. How are you? Inshallah.
Hello guys. Just to say hello. I'm sorry I'm late, and I'm just here to belong to the group. Maybe I have just 30 minutes to stay with you, just listening
We don't have 30 minutes, but
this is going to go on for a while.
Yeah, because guys, by the way, I wanted to talk about this as well. I forgot last week. So when we do not do English, we do not do translation, 2 hours will be too long, right?
Let's see how it goes. I'm happy today.
Okay, then we will go we will look how it goes, and then in some point we will most probably cut. Okay, back to
it's all about your endurance, Sheikh. All right.
So there is a problem with this. Actually, what we talked was important, and I love the idea. With the way we spread, the way we went out of the conversation, the main topic. But the main thing was here Al-Wahidi's words. The problem is he says it's not possible to know the exegesis of a verse without knowing the story, but we do not have the story of every single verse. We have many. We have quite enough, maybe for to some extent, but we don't have all of them. So according to this understanding, if we stick this kind of approach and say that every verse should be understood through the context, then unfortunately we are unable to do at least half of the Quran, because we do not have the sabab nuzul, the reasons or the conditions of verses for every and each individual the surahs. So that's why I mean it's important. That's true. It's very important. Sabab nuzul, sha'n nuzul is very important, but they are not like the way it is expressed here, I believe. This is my personal understanding. But let's see some examples. Safa and Marwa are among the waymarks of God.
Can you share the screen, please?
You don't see me?
We don't see the screen.
We see you, but not what you're showing us.
It shows that I am. No, okay, it has. Because I lost the contact. That's true. Now, do you see?
It's loading. Yeah. It's loading. It's loading. No, not yet.
Yeah, I can see it. You just have to switch to PowerPoint.
What happened? Oh my God! This is what's weird thing. Here. I need to add all of you individually, otherwise I don't see. That's so weird. So sorry, guys. So okay, do you see now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So let's check few verses. Safa and Marwa are among the indications of God, or waymarks of God. So whosoever makes the pilgrimage Hajj to the house or to visitation Umrah, it is no faulty in him, or it is not his sin, or it is not his guilt to circumambulate them. So what do we understand from this verse? It seems quite weird. Why God mentions? Do you see the screen, by the way, guys? Do all of you have it, right?
Yes, we see it.
Okay. So why Allah says it is no sin for the person who goes between Safa and Marwa? So we do not, if we do not have the background of this verse does not make quite sense. And it seems from the verse, it seems going between Safa and Marwa is acceptable, not necessary, right?
There's,
Do you
well,
see?
he says there's no fault. That means it's not punishable.
It's not
Right?
punishable. So it means he may do it or may not do it, right?
Yeah.
Correct.
Do you see from this verse actually he is obliged to do it or not?
No.
I would say that. Well, it depends on the definition of waymarks of God. Perhaps there is a sort of like another
No,
verse
it means
saying something
indication.
about that.
Actually, it means the like landmark. You can say landmark, or just one indication of Allah for the world. It does not say that, but the verse, supposedly in this verse, it doesn't seem that actually pilgrims has to go between Safa and Marwa. By the way, I need to explain a little bit, I guess, for the people who do not know. Safa and Marwa are two hills, and if you do pilgrimage according to Islamic general orthodoxy, you have to run or walk or speed walk between these two hills 7 times.
Yeah.
So this was a culture before Islam, and it is the same after Islam as well. But the verse here says it is not seen for the person who does this. So it is normally, logically, and normal Quranic expression, you would say that, okay, the person if does, there is no sin for him or her. But if the person doesn't, there is no sin for them as well.
Yeah.
But actually, it is not the case.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, because in the time of Jahiliyyah, people were doing this, and they put two idols on each what is it called? Each hills, and they were just going between those hills, running and then kissing and showing their respect to those idols. So that's why some of the believers, when the Mecca was conquered and when the Hajj was being done, some of the believers did continue this tradition, running between Safa and Marwa. Some did not do it and felt bad because there were idols there. And then this verse was revealed, and it was explaining that no, you should continue to do this because it is part of the Hajj. It's part of the Hajj. You should continue to do this, and there is no sin for people who does this, because you do not mean to worship those idols when you are doing this. You are just doing to follow the example of Abraham and actually in this case his wife Hajar.
So and that is expressed by the expression of waymarks of God, or how is it expressed?
No, it is expressed through the narrations talks about this verse.
Okay.
So we were talking about the reason of the sabab nuzul, reason of the revolution. The reason of the revolution, according to Tabrisi, says that I'm recording from him. He takes it from Imam al-Sadiq. The Muslims believe that Safa and Marwa were among the innovations of the people of Jahiliyyah ignorance. So for them, they thought God rejected this. That's why they were not performing one of the main pillar of the pilgrimage. That's why God revealed this verse was revealed, and that this verse says no, you should, in a way. Actually, although the verse does not say you should do it, the verse answers the questions of the people, which were saying, oh, we think that these people who did the running between those hills are sinners. The verse explains, no, they are not sinners. Actually, you should do it. This was learned from another verse, which will be recited, which should be recited as well, actually, here. that says learn the arkan, the rules of Hajj from God, and these are the rules. So Safa and Marwa, going between Safa and Marwa, is part of ritual of pilgrimage. But because it was done by ignorant people, Muslims at the early beginning of Islam, they thought this was the case. It was shirk. It was to do this. If we didn't have this knowledge, we would be most probably considering this verse as being just allowing to do this, not not actually necessitating it.
Yeah.
How about this challenge though? What if the Quran changed over time, and we're supposed to read it this way today, and we're supposed to read it differently then? Because then we had people had the narration, and they were able to refer to the narration while to understand this verse. Now we do not refer back to if you don't have the ability or the chance to refer back to the narration, maybe it is now right to read it this way.
Sorry, yeah, but that's true. But then we need to neglect almost all of the Quranic sciences because we are challenging actually with the main thing, if Quran exists or not. That's a good topic, and we can discuss this. Actually, we did a discussion in the early weeks, right? We had the discussion of if the how do we approach the Quran. There are problems about even the compilation of Quran, which we will also come back to that part, compilation of Quran soon. We can, yeah, that's true. We can actually challenge the idea of even Quran being problematic, and now we are reading this way. Maybe there was no this verse in Quran whatsoever in the early, but there is a but. We have other texts that says that this verse existed in Quran, and the reason of this verse exists is this. So for now, for the sake of these sessions, we keep the knowledge. Although we always put the question mark there, we keep the acceptance of Quran as a whole is Quran, and we accept it. Why this is important? Because if we do not establish this base, we will not be able to go further at all. Do you know what I mean, guys?
Yes.
But this is not putting the Quran itself in question. It's putting in question that we always read it over time in the same way. That the reading never changes throughout time. Can't the reading change throughout time?
Like what? How?
I don't know. That we read things differently. That we're supposed to read things differently today than they were read in the earlier times.
Definitely.
Because we have involved, the thing is still valid with a different reading.
If you are gonna be here, it is the seventh chapter. Okay. We are gonna talk about the recitation of Quran, reading styles of Quran, and how they can change the meaning. We will talk about that one as well. But shortly addressing your question, sorry, Moise, shortly addressing your question, that's important because there are words in just 200 years ago had different meaning and now have different meaning. Like even the very basic word in English, you, the word you, the second person pronoun, is actually in the past it had the meaning of plural, but now it has meaning of singular and plural all together. It doesn't make big difference. So this is the case for many words, actually, not just the basic ones. There are many others, many other words and reading type of you can read some Shakespearean books, and if you think from your understanding of the language, you might misunderstand the text. That's why we need to be here. We also need to know what they thought and what can we think. Moise?
The word circumambulate, is that the same word that's used when it talks about going around the Kaaba? Because when you go to run between Safa and Marwa, you don't necessarily go around Safa and Marwa themselves. You see what I'm saying? It's a different action.
No, it is the same verb.
So shouldn't it technically be to go around Safa Marwa, or do we assume that people knew what they were doing? So
No,
we are just continuing.
yes, so it's the language again. So for a single object, tawafa means going around the object, because the one single point has only one neighbor. It is around it. But
Okay.
if you are talking about two subjects, the neighboring these two subjects would be between it.
Okay.
Do you see?
Yeah. Okay.
Maybe, yeah, a bit more for an English thinking, yeah, that's difficult. But tawafa is going around the neighborhood of the whatever you are talking. When it is one object, it is around it. When it is two objects, it would be in between, because the only part that is neighboring two objects is only the between of them.
Okay. And does it also specify a direction, like clockwise or anti-clockwise?
No,
is
no.
that just crowd control?
It doesn't specify, and it is interestingly, it is a odd number. It is 7.
Yeah. No,
So
I also mean the direction, like clockwise or anti-clockwise.
For which one?
For anything, because it's anti-clockwise in both, isn't it? Safa Marwa, you go this way as well. And
No. Safa Marwa, two paths, and you go in between. There is no clockwise or anti-clockwise. You walk from here to that.
Yeah, but it's done anti-clockwise, isn't it? Like,
you don't go around. You go between.
No, I know, but like, if you see the direction, it's not clockwise. You go this way.
Okay, yeah. Going and coming back. Going and coming back.
Same with the Kaaba as well, isn't it?
Yeah. The route is decided that way. Yeah, going and coming back.
Yeah. So, is that specified from Tawafa, or is it just done?
No, it's not.
Hmm.
So, they question you. Let's put this one here. Another verse. They question you concerning humans, say they are timekeeping science for the people and for the sake of Hajj. It's not piety that you come into houses from their. This part is not important, but it's related. This part of the verse. It is not piety that you come into houses from their rather piety is one who is God-worthy and come into house from their doors, and be wary of Allah, and that you may be felicitated.
I have to say goodbye. I have guests coming.
Okay, bye-bye.
It was really nice meeting you. I'd love to stay.
No, nice meeting you too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, so in this verse, if we do not know the context, it is just a verse from just from up with no warning and anything. Just it is saying that it's not piety to go into the houses from their back. It is piety to go in from the front. The reality is that there people were, because there was a culture back then, and people would just jump into the other person's house from the back, show their what is it called, their closeness to the owner of the house. But this was happening to the Prophet and the others as well many times, and this was bothering Prophet, and it was in some occasions they were not in a situation that they would accept any guest, but people were still jumping in that way. So that's why the verse is revealed saying that do not do that.
That's another one from the hijab verse, right?
Yeah, one of those as well. They are using it for hijab as well.
Yeah, there's this verse about the women of the Prophet, and they shall talk through the hijab, whatever, like the curtain.
The curtain, yeah.
And that was one of the occasions, wasn't it?
But that was that's true. But there was something in that specific verse because and the context, because the house of Prophet was the mosque. So it was almost open to everyone. So, and sometimes people, even if they would come from the front, that would bother as well. That's why they put the curtain to make more comfortable, I believe. So another verse, and when there come to them to a book from Allah confirming that which is with them, and earlier they would pray for victory over the pagans. So when there came to them what they recognized, they defied it. So may the curse of Allah be on the faithless. So again, if we do not know this, the context of this verse, we will be struggling to understand what is it about. It is actually in the past, the Jews of Medina, they believed Prophet was coming, but they were thinking that he would come as a Jew and he would fight against pagans and destroy them. Actually, there is a very important topic there. You know, people of the pagans of Medina believed in Muhammad much earlier than pagans of Mecca. And that's why the migration happened, right? Because people of Medina believed in Muhammad alayhi salam, and Mecca did not believe. That's why Muhammad alayhi salam went to Medina with all the believers. The reason is actually the pagans of Medina heard a lot about a prophet, powerful prophet. It's actually a prophecy, a Jewish prophecy from the Tanakh, and they heard a lot about it. That's why as soon as the prophet came, from the fear that Jews would believe before them, they went and believed before everyone. And that's a historically an interesting comment.
But why is there fear? Like, more people believe the better, no?
Huh?
Or did they think he would be claimed by the Jewish as their own?
Because if he was to claim by Jewish as their own, general Jewish tradition is exclusive. They do not include other traditions. So if the prophet was accepted by Jews first, and then prophet they thought, they didn't know maybe, or I don't know, just imagine, maybe actually that would be the case. We don't know. So they thought if Muhammad was accepted by Jews and Jews gave him power, then Muhammad would be against them. So instead of being against of a powerful leader, they went for being for the powerful leader, and then they start being against the others whom actually taught about Muhammad himself. So yeah, there is a problem to identify the reason or the background of the revolution, and that's the majority of the hadith in this area are characterized by weak and chains in the chains of narration, which we might talk about this as well. Actually, maybe another session for hadith, and or unknown narrators. The chain of the hadith is the narrator are not known, or even broken chains which we do not know who was in the chain of the narration. Not to mention even sometimes they are fabrication and interpolation and forgery. Like those, we said that it's important to know the hadith that talks about the reasons of the revolution, but the problem with that is most of these hadiths are weak. They are not sahih, or they are not very strong hadiths. So that problem remains, and most of the time either the chain is broken, or chain is wrong, or chain is weak, at least in best case. Zarkashi says one must be wary of ones with weak chains of narrations and fabricated ones, because there are a lot of them. So Zarkashi, you remember from the early session, we said that he was one of the main figures of Quranic sciences, and he also values the sabab-e-nuzul, the reasons of the revelation. But he says we need to be very careful, because there are many narrations, they are either fabricated or their chain is weak, so that we can't trust them. So this is sabab-e-nuzul. And sha'n nuzul is the absence, in the absence of any mutawatir and mufrad hadith, from which one can be sure the truthful of the hadith, that we can do this. To rely on those narrations that provide us with the best explanation, which clears up an apparent ambiguity to the verse and solves the problem of its exegesis in the best way. So this is from again from Ma'rifat's book. He says that we can, if the narration is so weak and untrustworthy in general, and or they are not very strong, so we can do this. We can see the best of them, and from those best we can see if they are actually serving the purpose or not. If they are not against the main verses, they are not against anything, but they are just solving for us to understand the verse, or it's not incompatible with the fundamental of the religion, and it is not against any important and unrejectable parts of Islam, so that we can rely on the chain of narration. We don't have to reject completely. What do you think about this, guys? Do you think that we can actually rely on hadiths that are weak, but they are serving the purpose? They are giving us the information. If you say no, don't forget that we will have only few hadiths talking about Quran. Only very few. The rest they talk about the sabab nuzul, the context of the verses are most of the time are weak.
It's the same picking and choosing problem again.
Yeah, it is. I mean, to be honest, sometimes I feel religion itself is a picking and choosing problem, but it is between us, and out of record, please.
In my opinion, it's the same. It's the same topic with ahadith again. We are taking into account that there is a narration which is passed on over several people, perhaps even generations, then quite some time noted down afterwards, and that should be the key to the whole thing. It's not easy, in my opinion, because I still have not found any sort of theological master key to ahadith. That there's no theological theory about all the ahadith who have been passed on and considered sahih are automatically always true. There's no such narration or something like that, and so it's really we are talking about speculations, which is not a bad thing. We can speculate, but we always
if we don't speculate, we don't have anything.
Exactly. So
Quran itself is a kind of speculation in that sense, because we do have it now. We do have it as a big chunk in every house, but it was speculation in the time, because they were saying that, oh no, this verse is not part of it. The other were saying that no, this is not part of it. This was a speculation. So I do understand your concern, and I completely agree with that. I can't say I do not. I can challenge with that. I cannot say that. But there is a problem. Then there is no religion whatsoever, almost.
The point is, because I talk with people a lot about that. What is true and what is not, and people always want to have 100% certainty. And we will not be able to do that. We won't have 100% certainty, never ever, in regard to this topic or other topics, whatever. So the point is, I think it's one of the major topics not to go for certainty, but go for the speculation, learn on the way,
yes,
and accept the gap that might be possible, because.
Very sorry, guys. I'm leaving.
No, that's okay.
Kiss to you. I'm very sorry for tonight, and see you later.
No, bye-bye.
You, Majid, bye.
So it's all about having that gap and working with that gap. And from my very beginning, when I started to take my first steps in Islam, I saw gaps in in regard to things. And I think that's one of the things we need simply to accept, that we will never ever have certainty in a lot of topics.
Yeah,
And
that's true.
that's one part of our religion, which is actually bringing us further and closer to Allah, in my opinion.
Inshallah, it does.
Yeah, but I mean, people don't usually accept uncertainty as well.
Yes, I know.
It's drilled into you that this is miraculous, this is the book, everything is correct.
Yeah, but that's patriarchal instrumental thinking. It's either or. It's yes or no, and we need to overcome that. We need to fuse that with feminists and feminine expressive thinking, and fuse that together in order to have an ambiguous situation that we can actually stand, that we can say we are not sure. It may be like this, or it might be that. So that we have a diversity in things, and that we actually cherish it, because it brings us more together to cherish it than to fight over it.
Yeah, actually, that's a good point, especially the way patriarchy works and needs the solidity and like the certainty, which we do not actually necessarily, especially in religion. Sufism do not work with certainty. There is no certainty whatsoever. So religion actually on its own basis, in reality, none of the religions has the certainty, never almost has the certainty, but the way it is expressed is generally very certain, very direct and very strict and very saying and stating, not estimating, always stating. That's a big thing in patriarchy, and that should be challenged. That's true.
I'm wondering if that's a feature of patriarchy, or is it some sort of human condition that is more...
I think that's a good idea, yeah. That's a good
like, can we blame the patriarchy for people wanting to obey rules and follow something that's clearly visible? Like, maybe evolutionary speaking, people would rather be certain that there's...
Patriarchy was almost always part of our evolution as well.
True, yeah. So
it is quite difficult to separate patriarchy in any norm of humanity. Almost, it is that strong. We need to really be aware of the patriarchy, where it stands, and where it comes, and how it comes.
Yeah. You know. So let's assume, for example, you're a hunter-gatherer society, and you need to know for certain if you walk 10 kilometers that way, you're going to find water. Like, if a guy comes to you and says...
That's never the case, almost. Just imagine in a hunting and gathering society, because you are a nomad, you are always moving. For sure, the person who knew there is a water 10 kilometer or 10 meter in that way, he had the power. And it is actually kind of constructed the patriarchy, because he had the knowledge of where to go, where to hunt, where does animals come. So he had the power, no?
Yeah, exactly. As opposed to the guy who said...
The other people, if we were to be, because back then, fortunately or unfortunately, whatever we want to say, there was a reality, the people need to eat. So that's why the best option to go is with the certainty instead of risking. But we are living in a society, and we are talking about a quite spiritual, and not, although I believe it is necessary, but not very basic of our living. So that uncertainty is not really a bad problem. It's not a big problem, or it's not even a maybe problem on its own, because uncertainty, not in the... Okay, there is another problem raising. There is a big question here, because for the long time, God and also Quran actually quite explicitly says that uncertainty in belief is kufr. But belief in what? And also the belief and action, and believing in action is also different. Belief on its own, having a base and using that base to approach the other and having a connection with the other, relying on that base, that's we can call belief, and that's necessary. And without that, we wouldn't be able to even communicate. But the other details, which is called furu' in Islam, they are called branches, details. They are not necessarily to be believed and to be accepted completely and certainly. Let's keep this question. And Christian, we can't hear you. No, you are talking and I feel I can't hear you whatsoever.
No, Christian still can't hear you.
No, Christian, yeah, it's come. Okay.
Okay, I'd like to add a little bit. It's not long.
Okay.
You were mentioning the Sufi approach, and I couldn't find it right now. I only found the book, of course. There's a Sufi teacher from 12th century, and he was actually stating that a teacher or a person like an imam or somebody who is actually teaching somebody else should never reveal everything, because there should always be a secret hidden from the student. And with a patriarchal either or total 100% certainty approach, that's actually not possible, because the student will always want to know everything and he will not get it. And I really like the idea that that hiding a piece of the truth or the whole certainty helps you actually to go forward. I just wanted to add that because
yeah, that's true, but actually that also plays, unfortunately, this is, I don't know who Sufi master says that, but normal mystic Sufis, I can't see.
Raja, oh, okay, cool. He's one of ours.
Yeah. So he's really cool. This is really.
There are problems with.
He's also talking about Reformation, which is amazing.
But the problem here is again about the problem between Murid and Murshid. So Murshid, the one who guides, and Murid, the one who seeks. The Murshid always keeps something away from Murid, so that Murid is always obeying and following the Murshid. There is another patriarchal role also playing here, unfortunately. But normal mystics who do not accept Murid and Murshid, they accept co-irshad. In English we can say co-guidance.
I like that, co-irshad.
Co-guidance. They do not believe hiding anything from each other. They are completely trying to open up. We lost Christian. Okay, let's finish it here. And the homework is, I will write the homework. The homework will be finding a verse or like passage of verse or a passage, and do a research. It's sebeb-i nuzul.
And also the shan, or just the sabab?
Either. You can't find, most of the time you can't find both. You can find either generally, or if you can find both, that's perfect.
Okay. And can I cheat and just use something that I already know?
No. I mean, it would be okay, but if it would be better if you also searched more, but you go a little bit more. No?
I am back. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we are finishing. Just a second. I am trying to remember the which term is used. Background. That's.
I feel like this, I mean, it's sad, but it works. The discussion is more fruitful in just English when you don't have to translate. But
what do you mean?
It's
like,
not breaking up so much, right?
Yeah, like there's more ability to discuss.
With French, I think, yeah, unfortunately, that's true.
Yeah.
So,
but on the other side, I'm just to give you the impression for level 1. We had no translator for level 1, and most of the students were French speaking. So we never ever actually could not engage into discussions because we couldn't understand each other. And now we have a translator, which is like priceless because. Finally, the students can engage into discussion.
How did you find the translator?
I worked very heavily on Facebook, and finally somebody came up without being asked. Actually, a woman from Belgium, and she has English and French as second languages, and she offered herself. She wanted to join the course anyway, and I said, "Okay, you know what? Please join the course, and you're gonna get the course for free because of translating." Yeah. So
perfect,
that was
perfect.
yeah.
Yeah, actually, we should pay something for Majid as well.
Well, he's never there. He's never there.
Okay.
I didn't say that, of course. No.
Yasser is recording everything
Let
anyway.
me finish the homework. Is this? You see the homework? I would suggest go and find a little bit interesting verses. Like in the first, if you read that, you would understand differently. With Sabab Nuzul, it changes a little bit. Try to find, if you can, trying to find those verses. Or if you want to be lazy and if you don't have time, you do something but please give some resources. Tell me that I read from this book, so I can believe that you did some research.
I'm going to use Amina Wadu.
That's a cool homework because actually I started to do these kind of things quite some time ago already because it's really because it's so important if you have to discuss with a lot of people, and those especially with dogmatists, and they come with their literal ideas, and then you need to be a little bit prepared, like, okay, but that was the reason why it was revealed and this kind of thing. So
you need to be very prepared so that you don't need to fight, you don't need to say something that they will say, oh, it is completely against of Islam because of this, which maybe even you personally accept it, but you realize, oh, that can be interpreted this way, so I need to find another interpretation to understand. Okay, guys, it was very nice again, alhamdulillah, and take care of yourselves. Okay,
thanks, dude.
And you, thank you so much.
وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين. الفاتحة. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين.
آمين.
السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Have a good one. Thank you.